Ezra Whitlock was repairing fence posts when shots cracked down through the valley, 3 short bursts that caused him to stand there in mid-motion. In these territories, gunfire signaled one thing: trouble. He gazed in the direction of the ridge where dust clouds erupted quickly, too quickly for cattle, too uncontrolled for anything good. Then the voices, booming, brutal, the sound of men hunting for sport. Ezra was familiar with that tone. He'd heard it in the war when men forgot right from wrong. A boy figure burst through the trees, a native lad, perhaps 12, running over the rocks in terror. 4 behind him rode out, fanning wide like wolves. Ezra saw their leader, Colt Brennan, a gunslinger with a history drenched in blood. The boy crashed hard, leg twisted under him. Brennan and his men reined back, enjoying the chase. Ezra's rifle remained at the house, 100 yards in the rear. He had been able to remain hidden. He should have remained so. But when Brennan pointed his gun at the boy, something deep within Ezra flared up. He moved into the open. "That's far enough," he shouted. Brennan's gun came swinging toward him. "Well, look who's the hermit, Ezra Whitlock," he sneered. The boy gazed up at Ezra, a trail of blood down his forehead. Ezra's heart contracted. He couldn't have been much more than his own dead son, lost to fever years ago. "The boy's done no harm to you," Ezra said. "He's trespassing," Brennan answered unemotionally. "Same as you." But what Brennan didn't realize was this boy wasn't alone, and wasn't an ordinary kid. As Brennan's finger around the trigger tightened, Ezra stepped closer. The boy stood up, hobbled, agony on his face. "He stole 3 horses from the Morrison ranch," Brennan yelled. The boy looked at Ezra. "Those horses were my father's. Morrison stole them last winter. I was returning them home." Ezra had experience with Morrison, greedy and corrupt, always aiming at native families. Killing the boy over it wasn't justice if he was telling the truth, which Ezra was certain he was. Execution masked as law. Ezra continued on his way. "Even if he stole them, that's not worth murdering him for." "It is when I say it is," Brennan snarled. Ezra stood between the boy and 4 drawn guns. "You boys ride on. This doesn't have to get worse." The boy, Ayanna, Ezra would later learn, limped beside him, not hiding, but standing with him. "You don't have to do this," the boy whispered. "I know," Ezra replied, "but I'm going to." Brennan raised his rifle. "Your funeral, Whitlock." Then it happened. An arrow ripped through Brennan's shoulder, sending him tumbling off his horse. He screamed, landing on the ground. The other riders panicked. A second arrow whizzed by, and a third hit the ground at their horses' hooves. Frightened and leaderless, they stampeded toward the trees, abandoning Brennan in the dust. Ezra remained motionless, watching the ridgeline. Figures appeared, bow in hand, faces sharp and serene. One of them was led by a woman, gray hair in braids, eyes like steel. She walked down the hill, stopping at Brennan's rifle and kicking her foot onto it. "You hunt children?" she inquired, voice cold and fluid. "In our land, hunters of children don't live long." Brennan whined. "Morrison paid me," the woman spat. "That snake has stolen more than horses." She looked at Ezra, regarding him intently. "You stood up for my son when it would have been simpler to turn away." Ezra nodded quietly. Felt like the right thing to do. Then her tone changed, lower, weightier. "My son has the blood of our chief in him. Morrison didn't just take from us, he took from the grandson of Running Bear." Ezra's stomach twisted at the mention of Running Bear, a war chief every settler feared. Morrison hadn't merely stolen horses. He had touched off the tribe that could muster 200 warriors overnight. Nayeli, the boy's mother, tied Brennan's hands while delineating the stakes. Ezra had just saved the tribe's future chief. Brennan's final remnants of bravado dwindled as he understood who Ayanna truly was. Word would reach Morrison by nightfall. He would not flee, he would strike. Already one of Naeli's scouts reported Brennan's riders galloping straight to the ranch for reinforcements. Morrison would return with killers to silence every witness. Ezra faced a choice: abandon everything he'd built or stay and fight. He chose to stand his ground. Naeli embraced his determination, but cautioned that guts alone wouldn't halt a dozen guns. By tribal custom, one who saves a chief's blood makes them kin. Kin one must defend. As far-off hoofbeats rolled out across the ridge, Ayana stepped forward and introduced himself, and Naeli vowed her bow. Ezra, a long-time recluse, felt the strange tug of belonging. They fell back to Ezra's cabin, a shallow, bowl-shaped area of ground with hills on 3 sides and a creek on the 4th. It was no fortress, but it provided cover. There was little ammunition. The battle would have to be brief. Brennan, whiter than his face had ever been from the arrow wound, walked with them, living testimony whose word could bring down Morrison. The sun was not down yet when 9 mounted riflemen topped the eastern hill, Morrison in the lead, mustache quivering with arrogance. Morrison demanded the boy and the woman. Ezra retorted with the snick of a Winchester. Morrison laughed, believing in an easy massacre, 9 rifles to 3 defenders. Then Nellie's gaze shifted north. Between the pines, shapes materialized, dozens of mounted warriors slipping through the trees in silent formation. Ezra followed her eyes and whispered, "How many?" "Enough," she replied, stringing her bow. Morrison believed he held all the cards. In moments he would learn what it meant to pick a fight with Running Bear's blood, and with the hermit who had just found a family worth dying for. A fierce smile touched Naeli's lips as Morrison kept barking threats, still unaware his time was up. His men sat confidently in their saddles, believing they held the advantage. Then the forest shifted. One by one, warriors emerged from the tree line, then 10, then 20, until 50 mounted figures circled the clearing like ghosts rising from the earth. At their forefront rode Running Bear, eagle feathers flowing from his war helm, his presence quieting the valley like thunder on the wind. "Morrison," the chief bellowed, voice echoing like rolling stone, "we meet at last." Morrison's bluster fell apart. "This is a mistake, Chief. I was merely attempting to reclaim stolen property." Running Bear allowed the word to hang. "Stolen?" He raised a hand, and all the warriors cocked bow and rifle as one. "You stole my horses, burned over my brands, drove my cattle off in the dark. You hunted my grandson like an animal." One of Morrison's men stepped forward to get his rifle, and 3 arrows struck the ground at his feet. He was motionless. Ezra stood at the window of the cabin, watching tensely. This could be either a massacre or a miracle. Morrison fidgeted restlessly. "Look, perhaps we can come to some kind of agreement. I have land, money." "I don't want your money," Running Bear interrupted, gaze now on Ezra. "I want to know about the white man who stood between guns and my blood." "That's just Whitlock," Morrison sneered. "A nobody." Running Bear kicked off his horse. "A nobody," he repeated, "who risked everything for a child not his own, who chose honor over safety." He approached the cabin with the unyielding pace of a man who knew the burden of each step. "In our way," he stated, "a man who saves the chief's blood is made sacred by our people, guarded, family." He paused just short of the door. "Come on out, white man. Let me see the face of courage." Ezra approached, rifle at the ready. Naeli, Ayana, and Brennan, wounded, brought up the rear. Running Bear examined Ezra's face for a lengthy interval, then nodded. "You've fought in a war," he said. "More than I ever wanted to," Ezra answered. "And still today, you fought again, for a boy you didn't even know." Seemed like the thing to do. Running Bear smiled at last, deep and real, and turned to Morrison. You will leave this land. Take your men. Take your greed. If we see you within 100 miles of our borders again, you'll die where you stand. You can't do this, Morrison snapped. I have legal claims, government backing. Your government is far away, Running Bear said icily. But you are here. He raised his hand. Warriors stepped forward. The choice is simple. Argue and die, or leave and live. Morrison went pale, then wheeled his horse. This isn't over, he growled. Yes, Running Bear replied quietly. It is. As Morrison's men fell back under guard, the chief turned to Ezra. From his pouch he drew out a carved eagle feather wrapped in silver, a holy sign. This identifies you as kin. As long as you wear it, you are under our care. Your land is our land, your foes are ours. Ezra took the feather in silent reverence. I don't know what to say. Say nothing, Running Bear said. Simply live with honor. Treat others as you treated my grandson. Ayanna moved forward. Will we see you again? Ezra glanced at the boy, the mother who had believed in him, and the chief who had elected justice over revenge. This is my land, he said. You're always welcome here. Running Bear put a hand on Ezra's shoulder. Tonight, we dance in your honor. Tomorrow, all tribes will know of the white man who stood between a gun and an innocent child. When the war party marched north, 12 warriors stayed behind, quiet sentinels who moved into positions along Ezra's land. Your guard, Nayeli explained, until we're sure Morrison won't return. As the sun set behind the hills, drenching the valley in red and gold, Ezra stood at the door of his cabin. No longer alone. The hermit who had once longed for solitude had discovered something greater, family. And on this night, as promised, the drums reverberated from the northern hills, not for battle, but for the bridge constructed by the courage of one man. Because sometimes it is the smallest acts that ignite the greatest change. Sometimes doing what's right pays off more than we ever dreamed. And sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. Click the next video to listen to a message even more powerful, on with an end you'll never forget.